Hi, my name is Stephanie Syjuco. I'm a visual artist based in Oakland, California. I was born in the Philippines, in Manila, and I left when I was a young child. So in 1977, I left with my mother for the United States. That was essentially during the time of martial law, and so my memories of it are almost non-existent, but there were stories that I was hearing about. There was also, the 60s and 70s in the Philippines was this very rich time of both cultural flowering and also political unrest and change. I've been working with issues of archives and collections, mostly institution and museum collections, for about the past 5 years. I was mostly focusing on American colonial archives. So if you can think of images that were collected by either American or Spanish colonial photographers who were essentially taking photographs of early Filipinos from the late 19th century. Those are very specific in the sense that, of course, they're historical documents, but they also tell about the visual story from the side of the empire or the colonizer. Silverlens invited me to produce an exhibition here. They had made contact with Yael Buencamino Borromeo regarding utilizing the photo archives of the Manila Chronicle. That fit beautifully into my direction and also interest in working with Filipino-specific archives. And so based on that connection, I spent about 2 weeks working in the Lopez Museum archive, literally sitting with the entire photo collection, sifting through it, trying to find images that resonated. And also, in a way, it operated for me as a way to learn about recent Filipino history. There's a very fascinating term for newspaper photo archives. It's called a photo morgue. And so it kind of suggests this place where images or physical photographs go to, be laid to rest. And I thought it was amazing that there are these thousands of physical photographs, many of them which are not digitized and so have really not been viewed by the public. Many were also not actually printed in the newspapers. So it's this massive archive of a time period that is just kind of waiting to be revisited and relooked at. The beauty of the photo morgue, of this archive of the Manila Chronicle, is that all the photos, thousands and thousands of them, are organized by subject matter. So it's not by date, it's not by the photographer who took them. I would come across, a folder that was literally just labeled hair. And inside of that were hundreds of images of different hairstyles. There was also a folder of explosions and a folder of plants. And so it was fascinating to see these, kind of subject headings. And what was inside of it ranged from anything that would fit into that category. For me, seeing the fashion and culture images of the Philippines at the time was something that I actually wasn't used to seeing, because in the United States, we are so used to looking at the Colonial archive that any image that reflects of the Philippines as a kind of contemporary globalized society isn't as much at the surface. To revisit these images and also Filipino history, it was such a wonderful experience for me, because I felt like I was learning a part of a time in which I had really just missed. So as a balikbayan and coming back to kind of experience this history firsthand through the images of the photojournalists, it was a way for me to connect closer with my own relationship to the Philippines, but also to share, hopefully, with the Filipino public these images that have essentially not been seen for over 50 years. Out of that kind of excavation of the archive, I went back to my studio and sifted through about 1,000 images that I had taken. Part of my process is about thinking very deeply about what images can be juxtaposed to tell new stories about history. For my Silverlens exhibition, Inherent Vice, it's a solo exhibition, but I'm actually presenting two interrelated projects. They both come from the excavation of the Manila Chronicle collection, but they treat the images slightly differently. For the Inherent Vice show, it's pretty straightforward in the sense that I'm rephotographing images taken by photojournalists, layering the images in a kind of collage format, and I would shoot everything on top of the table within the archive itself. So those images are pretty straightforward, and as the viewer moves through the space, they kind of encounter images ranging from culture and design, also very kind of decorative and compelling images such as like flamboyant hairstyles. But then it's fascinating because those are juxtaposed with some very jarring images of, say, student protests. And what the viewer, I hope, gets from it is this very complicated look at that moment of Filipino history from the late 1960s to 1972, just before martial law shut down the Manila Chronicle. Along with the larger Inherent Vice, the related project called Force Majeure focuses mostly on large botanical photographs. And on first glance, they look like beautiful decorative displays of flowers or plants. And then when a viewer comes closer to it, they start to be able to pull out text and captions of photographs that I was actually overlaying onto those images. The captions are actually from student protest images in which, after a photograph would be taken, the journalist would write on the back of it any notes related to the events, as well as the captions that were attached to the political images when they were published. So there's this kind of interesting juxtaposition where you have to look carefully and closely to see the political messages or the text embedded in there. And I was thinking a lot about how when we relook at history today, it can be very difficult to see on the surface some of the nuances. And I appreciate drawing in the audience so that they have to look carefully, but hopefully something will come to the surface. Along with the collection of formally framed photographs, I thought it was important to produce something that could be distributed to the public. We printed a series of posters. It's a stack of about 8 inches high, and the visitors are invited to take a copy. And what they'll see on it appears to be a kind of blurry image. It's very difficult to read, but when you stand far away, you actually start to be able to call out and read some of the content of it. And what it is a reproduction of the very last printed issue of the Manila Chronicle, dated from September 23, 1972, only I used a very intense digital halftone on top of the content. Halftoning is also the way in which images were reproduced in newspapers. It's a way to kind of make the image easier to print. But when you blow up the image using a kind of extreme halftone, it's so difficult to see that I was attempting to create a metaphor for how, when we view history, it's only at a distance that perhaps we can start seeing it, but it's still difficult to read, and you have to spend time with it to fully see it. In the smaller gallery, or Gallery B, there are photographs on the wall and also a wonderful 66-minute long video that attempts to capture over 900 images that were not able to actually be printed for the exhibition. When a viewer goes into that space, they'll see a selection of objects pulled from the Lopez Museum's conservation department, as well as a sample of a photo envelope of, in this case, the subject was abaca. But it was a way for the viewer to really connect physically and not just think of these images as kind of, abstract, free-floating images. What interested me about including, these samples of paper pulp and the ways in which it shows how acid can degrade paper and all the ways in which a conservation team would want to fix that or counter that. I wanted to also tie in the idea that, to steward and remember history isn't just an abstract. The physical work that goes into maintaining and caring for an archive is actually one of labor. What I've discovered about having an archival practice is that history is still unsettled, in the sense that there's a kind of traditional idea that archival collections are places in which history goes to rest or not have any relevance to contemporary culture. But I think with my work, it's been a wonderful experience to have a chance to re-narrate the images, documents, and also archival items in the repository. Because if we can't learn from history, there's no point in kind of preserving or valuing these archives. I feel really privileged to be having this exhibition here. It's literally, my first solo exhibition in the Philippines. Silverlens is the perfect place for this exhibition because it really is a kind of homecoming. My attempt to connect to my Filipino heritage through the images of the Manila Chronicle is really one about not only thinking about Filipino history as something apart from me because I'm based so far away, but really about how things are connected. When I think that I was born 50 years ago here, wanting to kind of see the images of the time period in which I was a small child here, it's been a humbling experience and also something that I'm really proud to have been a part of.